Hi,
Hey,
Beth. How are you?
it's so good to see
Nice
you.
to see you. Congratulations on your book.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's a big deal. It's like giving birth to another baby, right?
I know. It's a big, big deal. I know. It's my little baby going into the world in a little while.
How does that make you feel? Are you scared? Are you nervous? Are you excited? What do you think is the overriding emotion you're feeling right now?
I definitely have a bit of anxiety, and I think it's not so much about like the content, but, I want, it's the intention. I'm just hoping that people get the intention of why I wrote the book. And I'm just hoping that it can be helpful. I just know on my journey, it was so difficult, like finding stories from other women that I found relatable to my experience, to just give me a little oxygen when I was in my sticky, challenging moments. And so I'm just hoping that this could give little breadcrumbs, little oxygen. You know what I mean?
When you describe the book, sort of your 30-second elevator pitch, Jada, and of course, we're going to talk a lot about what's in it. How would you describe it?
I would describe it as, a challenging journey to self-worth. Yeah, a woman's challenging journey to self-worth. Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about that journey. But before we do, I was thinking about you, Jada, and I've known you for a long time. I remember when you came on my talk show and you were very involved with, stopping human trafficking. You were so eloquent and poised, and I really enjoyed talking to you. And you had a tremendous amount of depth and commitment to this issue. But, man, people sure love to talk smack about you.
Yeah.
And people have such strong opinions about you. I mean, really about everyone in this day and age, but you seem to be a particular lightning rod. And I'm wondering if you ever felt like, screw you people, I'm not going to give you more ammunition to attack me. And my life is none of your damn business.
Right. I think that for me, because I've been attacked so much and because it really rolls off of my shoulder in a certain way now.
It does.
Yeah, because that's one of the beautiful parts about this journey of self-worth is like you really like my my identity of self-worth and what self-worth means to me. It has nothing to do or needs no validation from an outside source, right? And I know who I am. And I think that my belief is that a woman's journey is still considered so taboo to really, really talk about it, right? And I felt like, man, I've earned that. Meaning, what else could people say about me? And here I am, my heart's still beating, I'm still breathing in oxygen. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm still standing. And I know that most of what people talk about is really around a lot of misunderstanding. People really thinking that they know my story. And I got to take some responsibility around that I have contributed to, you know, a lot of that misunderstanding and false narrative. So, and that this is all part of the human experience. But I really feel that it's important for those of us who can, as far as women, to share our authentic journeys. And I just feel like, whatever, it's like I have really been able to deal with my level of self-judgment. And so anybody's judgment towards me, it has no force because my self-judgment is, I won't say cured, but I definitely have a really beautiful management of it. And so I know who I am.
You really share, I was going to say you really go there, which happened to be the title of my memoir that came out a couple of years ago, where I wanted to be very honest, but you are incredibly honest and vulnerable. And I'm wondering how scary that was. And are there things that you kept to yourself in this world where we share so much? Were there things that were almost sacred to you that you didn't want to tell the world about?
Well, I'm going to tell you, here's what's interesting. As vulnerable and as open as I am in this book, it's scratching the surface. It really is, you know. It's like I kept that close to the chest, you know, those things. And so I'm sharing the things that I'm comfortable with, you know. And you know, some of the stuff though, I was more concerned about others than myself.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I was concerned about my mom, you know, our journey together. And, you know, she's come through her journey in such a beautiful way. But I know that rehashing things can be difficult, and then having it on in print, you know. So I was really more concerned about others than myself.
I want to talk about your mom and your grandmother in a moment, but the opening pages are really riveting because you described, Jada, an extremely troubling scene that occurred a little over 10 years ago. You found yourself considering ways you could take your own life and make it appear to be a fatal accident. Can you take us back to that moment and why you thought it was important to begin your book with that?
I wanted to, well, first of all, I think that a huge part of my journey has been centered around mental health, honestly, you know. And I also wanted people to know from the gate, hey guys, we're about to take a deep dive, you know. And that was important to me. And that's really why I started there, because that was, I mean, that was a really difficult, that was my bottom, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to start you at the bottom, and then I'm going to take you back. And then I'm going to bring you back to that moment, you know, and then I'm going to take you on the next journey from that moment, you know.
And I'm going to explain to you how I got to that moment, which was in your car, right? Can you explain? I think it won't spoil anything because it is on the first few pages of the book. So,
yeah, I mean, I just remember, I can't remember. I was coming from, I think I was coming from somewhere in, I had a meeting or something, and I was literally driving home. And I just remember thinking, I was just looking while I was driving, and it was a road that I had driven quite often. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start checking out these clips. I really feel like I could make this look like an accident. I think this might be it. This might be the remedy here. And I remember pulling over and looking and all the different angles at which I could turn my wheel. And would I do it at night? Would I do it during the day? Getting out the car, seeing if it was steep enough. And as morbid as it might sound, I remember feeling more at ease because I had a plan. You know,
really,
it wasn't the first time. That wasn't the first time I had thought about, yeah, that wasn't the first time. And it was just really important for me to find a way to make it look like an accident because of my kids. I didn't want my children to ever think that I had committed suicide, you know? And that was really the most important part for me, you know, and it was one of the reasons why I was able to hold out for so long. And I was like, oh, this is the way that I can do it, you know.
You had considered ending your life when you were in your 20s as well.
I did. I did. And that was the first time. And that happened in an instant. It was almost like it was like a nervous breakdown. It was like just an overwhelming amount of intense emotions just took over me at once, to the point that my body was shaking. I kind of lost control of myself. And I remember getting home and calling my mother. I was like, you got to get out here. And my mother had to figure out, you know, how to get her job situation together. And she was, I think my mother was only a year into her sobriety. And I called my girlfriend, MC Light. I was like, I cannot be left alone. I need you right now. And she got on the first plane to come out to be with me in LA until my mother could come. Yeah. And you know, I never, and I talk about it in the book, from there, Debbie Allen got me a doctor who got me to a psychiatrist that put me on some Prozac to just stabilize me. And then I started therapy with the doctor that Debbie got me to, and I got stabilized. But then I met Will, and he became my new Prozac. You know, it's like that idea of just like, I'm good. You know, I got this new love in my life. You know, I'm good. I don't need to worry about all of that. And so I kind of just dropped the ball on my mental health. But you know, at that time, nobody was talking about mental health in the way that we talk about it now.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, nobody was talking about it. And so I kind of felt like, okay, I spent a year, you know, I'm feeling good. I should be getting back to my life now.
I'm so fascinated by what people experience as children and those wounds and that trauma and how it manifests itself later in life. And you spend a lot of time talking about your family, which is a very tender and nuanced, I think, portrait, because there was a lot of good, but a lot of really hard stuff you dealt with. You grew up in Baltimore. Can you talk a little bit, Jada, about your family situation, about first about your mom, a little bit about your dad, and then I'm going to move on to your grandmother, Marion.
Yeah, my mom had, you know, she was a teen mom. She had me at 17, you know, and my grandmother insisted that she marry my father, who was an addict and an alcoholic and a criminal, and two kids, you know, got married. They only stayed married for a year. My father was abusive. And thank goodness my mother was, you know, smart enough to just, you know, they had an incident, a physical violent incident, and that was it for her. She moved in with my grandparents, and we basically lived with them off and on throughout my childhood.
Your father, I think, told you when you were 7 years old, I'm a drug addict and a criminal, so I can't be your father. And you described that moment as one of the most important lessons in your young life.
Yeah,
How so?
it it really taught me how to it really embrace harsh truths. I have to tell you, I remember being so relieved that he told me the truth, right? That he's like, whatever expectations you have of me. I mean, that's basically what he's saying. I'm not going to be able to live up to the daddy thing, you know? And I, at that age, appreciated that. Now, as I got older, I got to see how that affected how my level of self-worth with men and in intimate relationships. but that was when I got older. But at that particular time, because I didn't really he wasn't really in my life in that way anyway. And I hadn't had a father. I didn't even know what it actually was anyway, to miss it. It wasn't until my stepfather came into the picture that I was like, oh, this is what a father is, and then when he left the premises, I really felt the loss of a father figure then.
Yeah. So you are basically living with your grandparents, Gilbert and Marion, and your mom. Your dad is out of the picture. You're relieved, but your mom then runs into a lot of challenges.
Yeah, my mother was a heroin addict, a high functioning heroin addict, because she worked as a nurse and at times even was head of a woman's clinic in Baltimore at the height of her addiction. And so, yeah, we definitely, she definitely had a lot of challenges in regards to her addiction.
How can you be a high functioning heroin addict? I guess I don't know enough about heroin to understand that, but is that unusual?
I would say for heroin, yes. I've never seen that. But my mother, yeah, she's an interesting one. Yeah, I've seen high functioning alcoholics, but I've never met a high functioning heroin addict. But she was that. I mean, when you see pictures of my mother in my teen years, throughout all the years, you would never know. You would never know. Never know.
But she got help.
Once she was in and out of rehab during my teen years. And she finally, I was 20 by the time my mother got clean.
You talk about your grandmother, Marion, and you write, whenever I think of my origin story, it's not really set on the streets of Baltimore. I think of Marion's garden. She was my mother's mother. Some of my earliest memories were formed at her side, out in her garden, learning powerful lessons I would use for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
What did you learn from your grandmother?
Oh man, how you can, my grandmother was a composter before that was a thing. And how you can take fish heads and lemon peels and, all of this garbage and put it into the earth and make some really great things, help nourish the earth, and how nothing is wasted. And that was a big lesson for me. And, she had this rose garden and she loved these roses. And it was so amazing to me how these roses were so beautiful, but they had these really thick thorns, really thick thorns. And, just as I got older and recognizing like, wow, how something so beautiful really understood how to set a boundary. Right. And so, right, how you have to set boundaries around all the treasures, all the beautiful treasures within yourself. And that's something I'm still learning to this day.
Writing a book is a bit like therapy. And I'm curious if you have a better understanding of this turbulent childhood of yours and how it has manifested itself in the woman you became and are continuing to become.
Yeah. My mom and I had some beautiful aha moments writing this book. That's why it was so important for me to go into the history of my great grandmother to my grandmother, to my mother, to myself, because you got to see this this line of trauma through us all, right? And how along the line, how that generational trauma was getting healed along the way. And I think my mother seeing that line and being able to connect the dots, my mother got a lot of healing. And so did I, in regards to why my mother might have reacted a certain way in certain aspects of my life. Like when I got pregnant, needing me to be married, because when she got pregnant, my grandmother demanded she get married, you know? So how her trauma from that experience just bled into, you know, my experience. And that was really eye-opening for us. But this book, I got so much healing out of it, just being able to make peace with so many aspects of my life, deepen the peace, because I thought I had, you know, once you write a book, you're like, oh, I thought I dealt with that. It's like, oh, actually, there's more stuff there that has to be looked at and dealt with. And I got the opportunity to do that, you know.
Why do you think you gravitated to the arts? And I'm wondering, was that in response? Was it looking for some kind of fantasy world where you could take on a different role and be a different person and kind of get away from some of the things that were difficult?
Yeah, no, because I remember being 3 years old and playing the Wicked Witch of the West in nursery school and and just loving it. I think I was born as an artist, and my grandmother was an artist. She was an oil painter. Like my grandmother was a visual artist. She played the piano. She was an oil painter. She could sketch. She threw clay on the wheel. All of her kids are artists in a certain manner. My mother makes jewelry with silver. I mean, you name it, right? And so I think that we all kind of had that artistic bug. And my grandmother really cultivated my interest in the arts. So I had to take tap dance, ballet. I had to take piano classes, all of it. I had to throw clay on the wheel. I had to learn how to arrange flowers. Oh, like so that's what my days were full of. Like I did not have a resting moment. Like on the weekends, I was up at 8 and I was off to all these different classes. So I was as busy during the weekend as I was during the weekday. So my
That's pretty amazing. That's incredible, though, that she did that for you, that she opened up those avenues for you and encouraged you to explore all those things. And
that's
you have a very sweet story about playing the Wizard of Oz when you were, well, you have a very sweet story about being 12 and playing Dorothy in the Wizard
Dorothy.
of Oz. And boy, honestly, I would be so traumatized because I'm always terrified of forgetting things or being in a public place and having to remember something and then freezing or drawing a blank. And that happened to you when you were about to sing the signature song of that musical or that show.
Absolutely. My entire family was there, and I am singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And in the middle of the song, I just forget. And I look into the audience and I say, hey guys, will you help me sing the song? I've forgotten the words. Will you sing along with me? And the audience is like, you know, and so they join in and I pick up where I was like, okay, that's where we are, and start singing, and we sing it together. And that was it. That was the finale. And everybody just enjoyed it so much, you know? And I was like, okay, show must go on. That was the first professional moment that I had. And you know, it's like I was quick on my feet.
What do you think that experience taught you? It seems to be a metaphor for life in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah, in a way, it's like don't be afraid to ask for help, even when it seems as though you shouldn't be in you're not in a position to, or you shouldn't be in a position to ask for help. You know, it's like that was the moment that I asked for help, and I'm the one who should have known the words, you know, but I didn't, and I got the help that I needed, and it was a joy, and we got through it together, and we all left with a smile. So it's like that's life right there. Ask for help.
And the people were happy to help you. I
Yeah.
think that's the other side of it,
Yeah.
that this audience wasn't sitting in judgment. They were there to catch you as you were falling.
Exactly. Absolutely. So, that's what life is really about at the end of the day.
Let's talk about as your career progressed. Debbie Allen was an incredibly important figure in your life. Talk to us about how you all joined forces. And I know she was a huge role model for you, but talk about sort of how your lives intersected.
Well, I went to audition for a different world, and it was just for a starring role. It was the character who it was a student who had contracted HIV, and I went into audition, and Debbie, she was like, "I want to know more about you. Tell me a little bit about you." And I told her my life story. I said, I'm from Baltimore, went to Baltimore School for the Arts, which is quite like fame. And I've always wanted to be like you. And I'm actually going to be the next Debbie Allen. And she cracked up. And, she just kept asking me questions. And she said, "You know what? I'm not going to give you the role you came into audition for. I'm going to write you, I'm going to make you a series regular." And she told me that in the room. And I was like, what? you know? And from then on, she's just been one of my, she's just been like a mother to me, honestly.
What kind of advice has Debbie Allen given you, Jada, when you've had these certain challenges in your life, or controversies, or people are ragging on you? I'm curious what she has told you through the years.
You know what? Debbie doesn't pay attention to that stuff because Debbie's been in this business a long time, and she knows that none of that matters. And Debbie rarely gives advice. Debbie checks in, she checks in. She's like, "Are you good? Okay, good. I want you to come to this thing." And I'm like, "Debbie, all this stuff is going on. I don't care about none of that. You come and you spend some time with me. We're going to be down here with these kids. I need you here to inspire these kids. Come on, we're not worried about these people. Now get on down here. Don't make me come get you." That's Debbie.
You mentioned the Baltimore School for the Arts. You had a very special classmate in that school.
I did. Tupac Shakur.
You all were very close while you were in school.
Yes.
Talk to us about that relationship.
Um, I talk about it in the book is like the idea we were kind of not literal orphans, right? But the idea that we had single moms who were addicts. And so we really depended on each other to compensate for what was missing at home a bit. And that's really how we became such good friends. And we had another good friend, actually happened to be my boyfriend at the time, John Cole. We were like the three musketeers. And so Tupac and John were really close, and John and I were dating at the time. And so it was the three of us all the time, you know. And so it was a really magical time of my life.
And I know you have some regrets about your relationship with Tupac, don't you? Or that you write about, that you weren't there for him, maybe, or that you
Oh
might
no.
have disappointed him.
Oh no, 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 no. No regrets and no disappointment. You might be referring to when he passed away, we weren't speaking.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah, I wouldn't say regret. And I wouldn't say that he was disappointed. I would say that we were really young, and just what life was presenting at that time in regards to what he was involved in and how I felt about it. And Pac and I were two very passionate people, and very opinionated, passionate people. And so I would definitely say, and I talk about it in the book, and the idea that, if you have a conflict with someone that you love and you cherish, just rectify it as quickly as possible, because, you just never know. You just never know. I never expected that Pac he would die. So we were young. I felt like he was invincible. You feel like you're invincible in your youth. So that's the last thing you're thinking about. And he had survived so much already.
Just today, coincidentally, a man was indicted for the murder of Tupac more than 25 years after his death. I don't know if you heard that,
Mm-hmm.
but that must have brought back a lot of memories for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think he was just 25 years old.
He was a baby. He's the age of my son right now. Right. And so, I'm hoping that, my hope is that we'll get a lot of questions answered. That's my hope in regards to that.
Let's talk about your career a little more, Jada. You went to Hollywood in the early 90s, and you write about this being a special time for young Black actors.
Mm-hmm.
Describe what the whole zeitgeist was like for young women and men like you.
Yeah, it was like, I call it the golden era. It's like, we had so much opportunity. Hollywood, in a certain manner, was so many doors were opening for our stories that had never been told before. Hip hop was on the rise to, coming into more of the, what do you call it? Commercial playing field. It wasn't underground anymore. You had so many stand-up comics that were, given the opportunity to have sitcoms, whether it was Martin or Will, or, you had Keenan Ivory Wayans within Living Color. I mean, it was just so much of our creativity that was given opportunity in Hollywood at that time. And that was the time that myself, Nia Long, Halle Berry, Regina King, we were all in the rooms together, and we were young and we were hungry, and it was a lot of opportunity happening. And so there was this level of sisterhood and camaraderie that was just beautiful during that time.
Sounds so exciting and fun.
Yeah, it was such an exciting time, and it was so fun. It was just like we were young, hungry, hot, and it was just happening.
Are you still close to all those girls?
Life does what life does. We hardly see each other, but when we do see each other, it's always love. It's always hugs, it's always grins. And, it is the memory of that time. And I think, I talk about it in the book, when Halle won the Oscar, she gave homage to that era, right? She gave homage to that era. And
that was such a beautiful moment, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And it's because of what that moment was. We were in it together. We all came up in the game together. And at that time, it was that was the attitude. If Halle got a role, we knew that Halle getting that role was ultimately going to open up doors for the rest of us, right? So Halle's win is our win. Nia's win is my win. You know what I mean? Because it's just going to create more opportunity. And that is what she stepped up on that Oscar stage with, is I'm here, but I'm bringing y'all with me. Yeah.
You met Will Smith, I know, a few times during those early years, but you write that you all didn't officially get together until 1995 when he called you the very week his divorce was final. And
Right.
you talk about falling for Will being a very unexpected thing for you,
Yeah.
which I was surprised to read, but I guess you were slightly put off by his vibe, if you will, kind of his whole persona.
No, that wasn't it at all. I was in the street dudes. It's as simple as that. You know,
Okay, well, he
yeah.
you weren't that into him though. I mean, and part of
Yeah.
it was because I know that you say me falling for Will Smith was very unexpected from afar, and even after meeting him a couple of times in the Hollywood world, I concluded that Will Smith would never have been on my radar only because he was so cheerful.
He was cheerful. That's right. Yeah, because street dudes aren't cheerful. You know what I mean? So I'm like, nah, that's not really my vibration right there. But don't judge a book by its cover.
And what was it that turned you around?
He was so, I think my maturity, honestly, and hadn't been through, I talk about it in the book. I just had gone through just so much stuff. I was like, you know what? You need to try a different kind of guy, right? And Will was just so intelligent. And he's one of those people that can go from the hood to the White House and everything in between, right? And, but it was really his intelligence coupled with his silliness. It was such a beautiful, kind of balance. And I could be really, he's all sky too, such a big dreamer and everything. He wants fun, and I'm so like contemplative and just always in my head and in my thoughts. And he just had a way of like getting me out of there and teaching me how to have some fun and how to laugh. And so that's really what it was.
But in a way, you lost yourself in the relationship, didn't you?
As time went on, and I think it's really universal, as women, and just trying to figure out, and being a young woman, what does it mean to be a wife? What does it mean to be a mother? And really trying to figure all that out along the way, and really losing myself. Not that I came into the relationship with much of myself, to be honest with you, but I was definitely very challenged in that way.
But how did that make you feel? I mean, how tough was that to navigate this feeling, I don't know, subsumed by someone else's big personality and character and feeling like you're less than? I think it must happen to a lot of Hollywood couples because it must be difficult to have two actors in a marriage, right? I don't know. It sounds like it would be hard to me, but
You know what? It wasn't so much that dynamic, right? It wasn't so much of like needing, that Will was this big persona and wanted this, big career, right? It was more of, hey, that's okay too, but hey, let's quiet it down and let's get into more of the intimacy of family, right? And so it was really more of that than being challenged with having two actors in the household, because I didn't want that. I didn't want to be the biggest, actress in the world. I was cool with that. All I wanted was like, hey, I want to have a beautiful family. So how do we figure out how to do both? That you can be the biggest movie star in the world and we have a beautiful family. And so that was more of the challenge. And so our priorities were different. And that was the challenge.
why was that hard for him? Was he just very performative, kind of always on and never was able to get into that more intimate space?
No, I think it was, if you think about men that are driven, um, that just becomes the thing that you think is the thing to do. I think it has more to do with that universal drive and youth. And it takes time to just get to a level of maturity in regards to that. And I think it's a really universal conflict that two individuals in a marriage tend to have different priorities, you know. And so I just think at that time he thought that was the thing to do, just like at the time I thought, no, focus on family is the thing to do, you know. And so he's
He
like,
didn't he didn't understand why you were unhappy, though, did he?
I didn't understand either. So yeah, you know, and I think it just had a lot to do with youth. It really had a lot to do with youth.
In this book, Jada, you talk a lot about rumors and speculation, because I think when people don't, I guess, share certain things, others will create their own narratives, right? This is what they do. And you
Right.
decided you were going to be honest and address some of these rumors head on. And, I've heard these rumors too through the years, and I'm always like, how do you know? And, who cares? But you talk about these rumors that circulated forever that you were gay and why that happened. And, I do think these things get out in the world and then they snowball, and then everyone says it, then it becomes almost accepted fact. It's
Yeah.
such a weird phenomenon. But
Yeah.
why do you want to address that? And I mean, why don't you tell us what you write in the book about that?
Yeah. I mean, because I was just like, let's just set the record straight in a certain manner, you know? And it was part of my like youthful experience that, I talk about in the book. I was like, absolutely had an experience with two women at different times. And and
I
it
was
was
like, this is spicier than I thought.
spicier than, yep, at two different times. And in your youth, just like you have options. It was like, all right, well, let me see if this is an option. And just realizing like, oh yeah, no, that's not quite my thing. Love women, just not in that way. And that's part of the journey. So that's why it was just part of my journey of coming into knowing who I am.
But why do you think people are so obsessed with that? I mean, and
Obsessed with everything. People get so obsessed with other people's lives because they don't want to pay attention to their own. So I think that people are always looking, to just, this looks too perfect. Let's nitpick at it. And no, they're beards for each other. And people are always people who are not happy, want to degrade things. That's all. And it's okay. It's no judgment. And I've learned that on my journey, not to judge it and just recognize, not to take it personally. There's nothing to take personal.
that's hard, though. I mean, it's hard to get to that point, isn't it? When people are, slinging all these.
Slinging all kinds of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. I think now it's more annoying than hurtful. It's just annoying. And I think in these times, honestly, people are having such difficulty. And I think people are just kind of acting out in different ways to just let off some steam that really has nothing to do with you or me, rather.
The other thing you set the record straight on, Jada, is this relationship you had that you call an entanglement, but you clarify in the book that it was not an affair. Honey, I don't know what that means. What is an entanglement?
So
What is that?
So it's a word that I actually came up with at the table, but it's actually a word that I heard a lot in all of my Buddhist readings. So you'll hear Jack Cornfield talk about it a lot, right? When I was listening to Jack, I was like, "Dag, is that where I got it from? Was it from Jack?" And then when I read the Gita talks about entanglements, right? And so they are these situations of confusion that we get involved in the material world. So we can be entangled in ourselves, arguments are entanglements. And, gossiping is a way that you can be entangled. And so that's how I looked at this particular situation, was an entanglement, but it was not an affair. And so people really thought that entanglement was a new word for affair. Now you can use it, absolutely. An affair can be an entanglement for sure. It's just that my situation was not an affair.
So what was it? If it wasn't an affair, I still don't quite understand. Is it just an emotional affair? Is it?
Well, no, in the book, I talk about how in 2016, Will and I were not together. We had gone our separate ways and we were both living separate lives and on our way to divorce. So we were done. That's it.
And yet, when he appeared on Red Table Talk, he seemed like the person who had been wronged.
Yeah. And what was so interesting, and that's why I love the table so much, you really got to see a wounded dynamic between us both. And an old story played out at that table because Will wasn't supposed to be at the table. I never asked him to come to the table, and
then
he wanted to come to the table. He was like, I don't want you to be there alone. I don't want you to do this alone. And I was like, oh, wow. I was actually surprised. And I was like, I thought that was a beautiful gesture. And once he came to the table and what happened, I kind of fell into my codependent martyrdom. And I was like, I am going to take care of you by all means necessary, because I see that you're not ready. And at the same time, Katie, I really wanted out of, I had come to the table and I was going to go to the table because I was on my specific journey. So with what I had at that time, that's how I knew how to handle that situation, while also being very forthright about my experience and not wanting shame. I wasn't going to walk in shame about that experience. And, but it was a very complicated moment. It was a very complicated moment. And we've done a lot of unpacking of that moment, to say the least.
I got to get to the slap, because I wondered when you wrote this book, Jada, if you were worried that was what people really wanted to focus on.
Maybe. I knew it was going to be a focus for sure.
And of course, it's been called the slap heard around the world. You refer to it as the holy slap. And it's fascinating.
Oh, the holy slap and the holy lessons. Yes.
And it's fascinating to read your account of the events, that, took you a while to process it. Like everyone else watching, you weren't sure if there's a real slap or, what was going through your mind, and how have you sort of come to terms with the whole thing?
What was going through my mind was, like I talked about in the book, I thought it was a skit. I was there as a family member, and there's a whole lot of history that goes with this, that, in the book.
With Chris and Will, and
history with Will, Chris, emancipation and us going into therapy, but we weren't together. We hadn't been husband and wife since 2016. So I was there with him as a family member, and not necessarily as his wife, but his life partner. And so when it happened, it looked like Chris slipped the shot and it looked like it was a skit. And then when Will turned around and walked back down the stage, that's when I realized, oh, something is going on here. But I still wasn't quite sure what was happening. And it wasn't until my publicist and Will's publicist came to our seats during the commercial break that Will's publicist said, you know, Chris is leaving the building, but he's not going to press charges. And I said, well, press charges for what? And she said, because Will hit Chris. And I looked to Will and I said, you hit Chris? You actually hit Chris? And he said, yes. And that's when I knew. I was like, well, I'm his wife now. We're going to get through this storm together. I knew it was going to be, you know, quite a journey.
It was heartbreaking because it was such an important moment for Will. You know, it could have been a moment as he won the Oscar of great triumph. And yet he seemed to sabotage everything. And you say in the book, you don't really want to explain his behavior, that that's his story to tell.
Absolutely.
But have you come to any kind of understanding? I'm sure you all have discussed this and gone over it and tried to understand where that impulse came from, Jada.
Oh yeah, we've talked about it, but like I said, that's, you know, that's his journey. That's his journey. I wouldn't do it justice. I promise.
And did it, how aggravating was it that so many people seemed to direct their anger at you and focus on you, and what role did you have, and were you egging him on and on and on and on?
You know, it's age old. It's so old. It's such an old story that it's the woman's fault when men behave unsavory. So, you know, it's not unique to me, and I wasn't surprised.
We have to wrap things up, I know, and your publicist is going to kill me. But before, just as the end, what is the nature of your relationship now? Have you all come to an understanding? I know that you said after one of your ayahuasca journeys that you shared with Will and some other family and friends, you declared each other the king and queen of each other's hearts, though not in a romantic sense. So where are you right now in your relationship?
Beautiful life partnership, and just in the recognition that we want to share this lifetime together. And, you know, we're still figuring out what that's going to look like.
Does that mean husband and wife? Does it mean friends? What does that mean exactly?
We're still trying to figure it out.
Well, the book,
that's what we want to do, you know?
So you're together.
Yeah. I mean, we're together. We're just trying to figure out what that togetherness looks like.
Well, the book is called Worthy, and Jada, I think you've done an incredible job of really being honest about not only your experience, but the human experience in general. And when you look ahead, what are you most excited about after this?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. You know, I'm just kind of like, I am looking forward to going on a book tour. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to going out and talking to people and shaking hands and talking about the book in intimate group settings. I'm looking forward to that.
Just sharing with others what you've learned and in hopes of helping them.
Or just, you know, sharing the book and seeing people's thoughts and, you know, and just getting out there and, you know, having intimate conversations live. I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to take the red table, you know, out around to different cities. And now we're kind of doing that. So, you know, I'm kind of excited about that. So.
Well, thank you for spending time with us. And the book again is called Worthy. And Jada, I hope it's not 10 plus years before I see you again.
I know, but it's so good to see you. Really, it was wonderful to have this conversation today.
Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
Okay, you too. Bye, Jada.